Good evening. On the 14th of June, Sushant Singh Rajput was found dead in his Mumbai residence. The city police investigated the actor's death, came to a conclusion that it was a suicide. But his family alleged foul play and blamed Sushant's former girlfriend Rhea. The public outcry was such that the Supreme Court transferred the case to the CBI. And now, the AIIMS Medical Board has informed the CBI that Sushant's death was caused by hanging due to suicide. But the family is once again questioning this report and wants the CBI to set up a new forensics team. After nearly 4 months, we're still asking that basic question. Was it murder? Was it suicide? Was it abetment to suicide? Will the CBI come out and set the record straight tonight?
The tapes that are being played by certain media outlets are definitely misleading. Date of the tapes is 22nd of August, and by 27th is when the AIIMS started receiving the material.
The CBI sources are saying that, of course, they are not ruling out anything, but now their prime investigation is going to be towards the suicide and abetment to suicide.
I challenge how many people have seen our investigation who were reporting about the flaws in our investigation. It was vested interests who were doing it. It was a motivated campaign which was run.
Nearly 4 months after Sushant Singh Rajput's death, the AIIMS Medical Board has concluded that there was no case of murder here, it was a case of suicide. While the Mumbai police is saying, "We told you so," the late actor's family is not letting matters rest. Will the CBI, the premier investigating agency of the country, now offer definitive conclusion to this?
रिया मेरे बेटे सुशांत को लंबे समय से जहर पिलाया करती थी, वो इसकी हत्यारी है.
His family had alleged that Sushant was poisoned. His family's lawyer had claimed that Sushant was strangled to death. And now, the AIIMS panel has informed the CBI that there is no evidence to suggest that Sushant Singh Rajput was murdered on the 14th of June. The Mumbai police says what it had always known has only been reaffirmed.
We did a very professional investigation, and when Honorable Supreme Court asked for a progress report in the case, we submitted our progress report to the Honorable Supreme Court. They said they did not find any fault with the investigation of Mumbai police, and they were satisfied with the investigation. So all the criticism, all the attacks which happened were without any knowledge of the investigation.
The Mumbai police, based on the autopsy, had been investigating Sushant's death as a suicide. But allegations from the late actor's family raised questions over the probe, and it was then handed over to the CBI in August.
मुंबई पुलिस के जांच के ऊपर किसी ने प्रश्न चिन्ह निर्माण किया, ये पूरी राजनीति हुई, इसलिए सीबीआई को यहाँ बुलाया गया. अगर आपका सीबीआई के ऊपर भी विश्वास नहीं है, तो we are speechless.
The Aghadi government called it a conspiracy to malign them and the Mumbai police.
Everybody tried to ridicule Mumbai police and Maharashtra state government. All those allegations were baseless and deliberately made to malign the state government. And I think today everything is clear now.
But the late actor's family has called the AIIMS team's report inconclusive. They plan to request the CBI to form a new forensic team. Adding fuel to fire, some media outlets are dismissing the AIIMS probe team report by running tapes in which panel head Dr. Sudhir Gupta is allegedly heard saying Sushant was murdered. But what many channels are conveniently failing to point out is that the tape is from the 22nd of August, the very day the AIIMS board panel was formed. So what Dr. Sudhir Gupta can be heard saying in the tapes is nothing but his initial observation of the case.
Just to delve a little more deeper into that, the reality is this AIIMS tape that some channels have put out is 5 weeks old. It was the initial reaction by Sudhir Gupta the day after AIIMS was referred this matter by the CBI. Let's bring that up to speed so that our viewers are clear about this. Because on the 21st of August is when Dr. Sudhir Gupta is appointed as the forensic examination team head. He constitutes a board of 7 members, including himself. The next day is when the tape or that conversation happens. on the second day, that is August 22nd, the AIMS Medical Board is constituted to probe Sushant Singh Rajput's death. Then, 5 days later, one team of that board, I think about 3 members out of 7, go to Mumbai to the alleged crime scene to try and recreate what exactly happened to Sushant Singh Rajput. Then, after that, in September, which is on the 5th of September, 2 weeks after the AIMS board was constituted, members of the probe team visit Mumbai to try and find out what exactly happened to Sushant Singh Rajput. And then finally, at the end of that month, on the 28th of September, the AIMS team submits its report to the CBI. And we haven't officially heard from the CBI other than this evening when they said that all angles are still being probed. Rajiv Pandey, BJP leader, joining us. AKashdeep, filmmaker, Nupur Mehta, actor, and YP Singh, former ACP Mumbai Police, also joining us. I'll start with you, Rajiv Pandey. AIMS is the premier medical institute in the country for all high-profile crimes. It is AIMS that goes into the final medical legal report. If the head of that board is suggesting that there was no murder involved in Sushant Singh Rajput's case, then why wouldn't the CBI and why wouldn't the so-called fake news channels finally come around to this?
Zakka, from day one, everybody was questioning about the way the investigation was done earlier. Now the CBI has given some information, some findings that will be analyzed by the CBI. We are not investigating agencies. As a party, we have nothing to say about that. Finally, the CBI is investigating the matter. And if CBI finds that the report is fine or they have no problem, and CBI can collect other aspect also, other evidences, and if they declare, if they file a final report that what has happened, then only we can reach to the conclusion.
How can whatever else they find as evidence, and admittedly they can find anything they want to find as evidence, that has to be consistent with the medical legal report that's been given. That's why you have post-mortem. That's why you have forensics.
I completely agree with you, Zakka, that what AIMS has given, that whether this is a murder or this is a homicide, now AIMS has categorically stated that this is a suicide.
Yes.
Now it is up to the CBI to examine that, and if CBI still have some corroborative evidence.
YP Singh, you've been a former cop, you're a lawyer now, you're on both sides of this debate. Tell us, how important is a medical legal report in the final scheme of things when this matter comes up in court? Is it just one piece of instrument or one element to, going about piecing together a crime, or is it a critical element?
It is a very substantial piece of evidence of an overwhelming nature, because Indian Evidence Act assigns enormous credibility to the opinions made by experts. And here AIMS is not just an expert, but here the expert opinion has been carved out by a team of eminent people, experts who have doctors and all, who have given a specific opinion. So I think this opinion will be binding.
No, but tell me this, just for our viewers to understand, have there been, YP Singh, have there been cases that you have investigated in the past where the post-mortem has said one thing, but the eventual investigation conclusion is something else, and that's been upheld by a court of law?
Certainly, if the post-mortem reports come to a very categorical finding, investigation cannot be otherwise. Logically, it will not be possible, because if AIMS has come out with a report which is a suicide, logically it is impossible to say that it's a case of murder. So, and I think the only angle which remains is the abetment to suicide, which the CBI may look into.
No, which is fair enough. I'm not denouncing, or I'm not discounting that factor. I think what is most important is to find out what happened to Sushant Singh Rajput. Whether it was murder or suicide or abetment to suicide is a separate matter altogether. But so Nupur, if the premier medical institute in the country and the board constituted under that institute has come to this conclusion that this was not a case of homicide, why wouldn't people like you buy it? Why wouldn't you accept it?
Good evening, Zakka. Well, to answer your question, this is like a roller coaster ride now. We've now come to an end of 3 months. The 4th month is starting and the investigations are still going on. However, I wouldn't buy it because the character of the victim doesn't really show that he could commit a suicide. However, 80% of the Visaria was consumed by the Cooper Hospital. 20% came to AIMS. Now, they have a very half-handed reports out of it. And the statement of Dr. Sudhir Gupta from the AIMS kept changing. On the 22nd of August, he said something else. He said that the crime spot was contaminated and, tampered and tainted, and it was foul play happened there.
So one thing, I want to be clear for our viewers. There are some channels running a private conversation between Dr. Gupta and a reporter of that channel.
Right.
It was a private conversation. It was not meant to be put out in the public domain. Anyway, they leaked that private conversation, be that as it may. The point is, that conversation, as I explained a moment ago, was the day after AIMS got this case. That is very, very different from the final conclusion that this board of 7 eminent forensic experts have unanimously come to a conclusion about. I mean, it's one thing to say something on the day after that you've got the case file. These are your initial observations. But after your probe, after your study, you've come to a different conclusion. Which do you give premium? And 7 people have come to that conclusion, not just one doctor, by the way.
Absolutely. The entire board has come to this conclusion. But I'm of a very intuitive viewpoint here. Why did the board of doctors from AIMS make a press conference and interact with the press directly? Why were they basking for the media glory all of a sudden? Why did they want to be in the spotlight? I think they should have been a confidential report in a sealed package gone to the CBI and let the investigating authority, which is the CBI, disclose it to the press and media and the public. They should not have had a press conference. And in 2 days, you changed the statement.
I'm not going to argue on that. It's a fair point. But AKashdeep, please, I want to concentrate on the material fact that's been placed today. We know that this is what the report is saying. 7 doctors are saying this. They're saying this unanimously. And yet, the family is not accepting it. The family lawyer is now saying, I'm going to ask for a new forensics team to be constituted. I don't even know if that's, that's allowed or that's permissible. Maybe the CBI will consider his request. Maybe they won't. But we've got to come around finally to some sense of closure on this case. I mean, this is what the entire country has been talking about, for 4 months. And if that closure and that conclusion is uncomfortable to certain people, be that as it may, sometimes the truth is bitter. AKashdeep.
Zakka, unfortunately, from the time this case has been stirred up to people, everyone has decided what the end should be. And anytime and anywhere that the disclosures, reports don't tally with their own version of the truth, they are going to say it's rubbish. Now, constituting a new forensic team with the same evidence that Cooper has left behind, with the same shoddy post-mortem, with the same half material being there, videography not there, photographs not there. So now what will the new team do their research on? So people have made up their mind, and everyone is a Sherlock Holmes here who thinks it's murder. We all agree to half the truth, at least me. Things didn't look like a straight case of suicide. Bombay police, people were not happy. They are the ones who asked for CBI. CBI said we are bringing an AIMS team. Everybody knew that what is left behind in terms of the post-mortem is not complete. But why did they keep quiet? Because they were expecting the AIMS report to say murder, murder, murder. Well, now that it doesn't say, it doesn't suit them. Now they say, how can he say that? So if you were thinking that AIMS will not be able to give you a good report, why didn't you say this earlier?
My simple point of contention there is, AKashdeep, you can't have it both ways. On the one hand, you can't say people have already come to a conclusion and that they are working backwards. On the other hand, you can't say that they were working with the same shoddy evidence. I mean, ultimately, the conclusion that they come to has to be accepted.
Zakka,
it's a professional body, forensic experts, best in the country. Let's accept what their conclusion is. You're not a forensic expert. I am not. These jokers who come on these fake news channels are not forensic experts. Let's listen to the forensic experts.
That's the point I was making, that I do not subscribe to that end theory that most have, that it's murder. I say I'm going to wait. And I am not qualified above AIMS, and there is no other medical board above AIMS. If now we are not happy with what AIMS has said, because it doesn't suit what we built up in our minds, I don't subscribe to that.
Rajiv Pandey,
I have to stop and move
I
on.
mean, is
Now
it even legally feasible for the victim's family in this case to ask for the reconstitution of a medico-legal board?
Material left. How are they going to give a
the
better
material is
now?
going to be the same. They're not going to get new or fresh material.
And Zakka, even if this new committee does not speak in their favor, they'll ask for another.
No, okay. Let Rajiv Pandey respond. Let Rajiv Pandey respond.
That is not
Let him
right.
respond. Let him respond.
Zakka, I agree with YP Singh ji that post-mortem report is a very vital evidence for any trial, for any criminal trial. That is the basis that first you have to reach to a conclusion that whether this is a suicide or it is a homicide. Now the CBI, the AIMS panel has given it is a homicide, suicide case. If you see earlier, even the father of Sushant Singh Rajput filed an FIR for abatement of suicide. So now finally it is up to the family. They may approach the court for the constitution of new team or not. I am not going to that point. But we have to wait for the CBI final say what CBI is thinking. But politically, I wish to state one thing, Zakka.
Yeah.
When the matter was transferred to CBI, everybody was saying, you know, there is some politics and some people are playing politics. Where is the politics now? Central government, the family member asked that it's,
I don't want to get into I don't want to get into the politics. But one second. If the CBI wants to really clear the air on all of this, they should just come out with a public statement saying, yes, this is what the AIMS board has told us.
Zakka, we should wait for that.
Oh, we are waiting.
CBI after this also.
No, we are waiting.
We are
Mr. Rajiv Pandey, AIMS gave its report to the CBI on 28th September. Today is 5th of October. We are still waiting for official statement from the CBI.
Zakka, that's the point. If CBI is convinced,
I am convinced about I'm convinced about one thing. AKashdeep, one second. Let me get Nupur back in. I'm convinced about one thing. I think I don't know who on the panel said this, but I think AKashdeep said it, that you can't decide the conclusion of a legal case and then work backwards.
Absolutely.
You know that's where the problem is. There is a certain conclusion that suits some people, and they've already made up their minds about that conclusion. Now you're retrofitting everything else to arrive at that conclusion. You can't do that.
Well, you cannot have a reverse strategy to the conclusion that has already been made. But in this case, Zakka, there is nothing conclusive. There are no conclusions. Everything is happening on speculations.
The conclusion you made, when I mean you, I mean, you know, generally a lot of folks like you have made, is that you have decided that Sushant was incapable of committing suicide, therefore it has to be murder. That's the conclusion you've made. But the evidence doesn't point to that.
Based on the evidences that have come out in media and by the investigating authorities, I, as a person, in my viewpoint, I've made these kind of conclusions, and based on the character of the victim, as I said. Now,
but if when there is a definitive report by the country's premier hospital, we should, in all deference, you know, bow down and respect that report. They're experts.
No, I would like to make one thing very clear. There's a difference. This is a board of 7 doctors, and they have made a panel and they've come out with these kind of forensic reports. There's not even like the basic post-mortem report. I don't think that they are the institution in themselves. They are not AIMS in themselves. AIM is a worldly recognized institution of our governing body.
No. Now you're again nitpicking. You're nitpicking.
Maybe you can change the panel and then the forensic report is different.
You're nitpicking. Let me give the final word to YP Singh. Where does the case go from here? I've got to wrap up in 30 seconds, sir. Can the CBI come to a different conclusion? That's what I want to know.
This is a plain case. Right from the inception, I had said this is a case of plain suicide. CBI now has got no other option but to accept it as a suicide. The only next option could be whether it's a case of abatement to suicide or not. which I don't think. I think this case is heading for the closure.
All right, I'll thank all my guests for joining us. Ultimately, like I said, I think the greatest service that any of us can do to Sushant and his family and his fans is to actually know the truth and pursue the truth about what happened to Sushant, whether it was suicide or abetment to suicide or murder, and not prejudge a case, come to a conclusion, and then work our way backwards. I'll leave it at that. Thanks very much to all my guests. Other stories that have made the headlines amid the LAC standoff between India and China. The Air Force Chief today, R.K. Bhadoria, has shot a stern warning at both Pakistan and China. He has said that there's no question of a